Game over. It is game over.
Game over, cancer. I'm Val Solomon, Director of Program Impact at Cannonball Kids Cancer Foundation.
And I'm Dana Nichols, Executive Director of CKC.
Game Over Cancer, a podcast dedicated to exploring conversations about pediatric cancer research, solutions, and inspiring family stories.
We're a nonprofit dedicated to creating innovative treatment options for kids fighting cancer and educating for change.
By creating a space for these conversations, we empower the community to take action and provide tangible hope.
Game over, cancer. Screw you, cancer.
Today's episode is all about expanding what we mean by better. We talk about, in CKC, better treatments for kids, but what does better actually mean? I think we focus a whole lot on improving the science, improving the treatment so that kids get better and survive.
Yes.
And we're talking with a guest today about how do we make their quality of life improve while they're having those treatments.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts is he says, yes, and that's exactly it. We want that success you're talking about, but and what can we do for them in the now, and what does it look like? So what we can do right now is the topic of conversation. How do we connect as humans? And this is a beautiful episode, and I'm really, really excited for everyone to get to hear it.
Take a listen. Dr. Justin Baker is Chief of the Division of Quality of Life and the Pediatric Palliative Care at Stanford Medicine and Director of the Quality of Life for All, or KOALA program. He's a board-certified pediatric oncologist and palliative care physician dedicated to improving quality of life for children with serious illnesses and their families. And that includes kids with cancer, which is why we're talking with him today. Before joining Stanford, he spent many years at St. Jude's, where he helped establish the pediatric palliative care program there. His research focuses on integrating palliative care throughout the childhood cancer journey, improving symptom management, and supporting families every step of the way. His work is helping to redefine pediatric palliative care by showing that it's about living as well as possible from diagnosis onward, not just end-of-life care, which is real exciting to talk about. Please welcome Dr. Justin Baker.
Hello.
Hello.
Nice to be with you today. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining us.
And of course, I love that his tagline says Chief Koala Bear.
I know this is going to be my favorite episode already. Oh, a pun, a little zhuzh, a little personality. We're in.
That's right. Here we go. Here we go.
All right. So tell us a little about KOALA.
Yeah. So again, thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful to be here. When we think about palliative care, many people have a negative connotation. And so we've always had to think about how do we overcome that? And one of the ways I like to think about it is when I contemplate palliative care, I'm always trying to work towards improving somebody's quality of life. And so actually, as we got started at St. Jude, we were called the Quality of Life Service. And then I thought, we need a mascot. And so I actually went into a bathroom at one point and had this epiphany. If you think about the diaper changing stations, those are called koala care stations. And I thought, oh goodness, a koala, that could do it. Quality of life. And so that is our quality of life for all. And as you can see, I have plenty of koalas. In my office here, I literally have more than 100 koalas surrounding me. I have my little name placard, which makes it very official. Look, Justin Baker, Chief Koala Bear. So it works really well as we talk about palliative care being all about quality of life, and that it is for everybody. It's not only for that patient, it's also for the family. We also think about how to help support staff. So we think about staff resilience and issues related to moral distress. And so we really are trying to think about how to promote quality of life.
It's such an integrated and whole approach, right?
Yeah.
Not just the patient, but the patient and the family, the siblings, and also who are the people who are walking with them in this time and how do we care for them? It's very much a value that I think we talk about a whole lot in the work that we do, which is when families are sharing their stories with us, when donors get involved, and everybody's trying to show up in a way that is helpful and that is engaging. And sometimes people are thinking about, am I showing up in the right way? And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, in your line of work and you and your staff, how do you all show up for families in this very difficult process? And how does that you show up for each other in that sense?
It's a great question. One of the beautiful things about palliative care, in fact, probably the thing that got me into palliative care, or at least the thing that got me into medicine, let's say, and then I really feel like I stumbled into palliative care, and it was clearly exactly what God needed me and wanted me to be doing. But when we show up for our patients and families, we try to think about one thing, and that is connection. How can I connect with them? And the interesting thing is when you think about quality of life for all, the kind of disease that we're trying to treat in palliative care is suffering. And people suffer in so many different ways. They suffer because of relationships being fractured, or they suffer because of pain and symptoms, or they suffer financially, or they suffer in any number of ways, existentially, spiritually, for instance. And so what we do is we come and look at the entire picture, the entire holistic picture with that patient, with that family, with that culture, with that situation. We look at it with eyes of a physician. I frequently will go in with a social worker, a psychologist. We have a chaplain, we have a nurse. So we are all looking at this scenario and trying to figure out, okay, where are we seeing issues that are causing suffering, and how can we best manage those? How can we best attend to those? But it really comes down to the simplicity of also connection. And we know that the deeper we can connect, the more that we can help support families. This concept of compassion is one that's really essential. Compassion, the word literally means to suffer with. That means that we're able to carry some of the burdens, carry some of the weight of our patients and families. And one of the best ways to do that is through connection.
I think that really hits, I think, with a lot of what we talk about in our work too, which is, just not leaving families out to dry, like having somebody to show up, even if it's imperfect, just trying to show up and do and be with them. And I feel like you're illustrating it a little bit as you talk, but I wonder if you could chat a little bit about, I think when people think about palliative care and it's the thing that everybody doesn't know what to do. Like you don't know what to do when to show up for a family that's dealing with cancer. And it seems very difficult, and you all have a career in it. And so I wonder, one, does it sound like, to me, it seems like other people will be like, well, that's really hard. I couldn't do that. So do you hear that a lot? And also, what do people misunderstand about your job? Like what's misunderstood in a way that will help people understand how you show up, so maybe they can understand how they can show up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have an interesting story I sometimes like to share. It's a common question I have to answer, kind of how do you do this? And so there's a little bit of a roundabout way that I like to think about this. My brother, he's an amazing guy, and he was a CPA, and he's not a CPA anymore. He's in the FBI. But when he was a CPA, he was doing this work, and he was so excited about it. And he came home, I'm his big brother, and he wanted to tell me about it. And he goes, Justin, I got the Walmart account. And he was telling me this story about all the things. I'm like, Jeremy, I want to be excited with you. Tell me about it. What does it mean? Tell me what you do. And he laid out this whole story. And as he told it to me, I'm like, Jeremy, I need to summarize just to make sure I understand. You're counting things that other people have already counted to make sure they counted them right. And he goes, yes, for Walmart. And I thought, oh my goodness, my job is so different than that. So for me, if you put me into Jeremy's role, I could never do it. That's not something that I'm built for. It's not something that God has equipped me for. And so the beautiful thing that has happened to me is I am able to be my most authentic self, my most koala-like self in the space of palliative care. And so it's incredible for me that I get to do this work. And I think that as I try to picture doing something else, it would be almost impossible. Yes, we find ourselves in the middle of very, very difficult situations, heavy, emotionally laden, really disastrous situations. And many times you're just trying to look for the better of some really bad options. And at the same time, the part that I think people would be shocked about is there's so much laughter and joy, and there's so much living that happens in the middle of our team being involved. In fact, that's one of the things that we really try to figure out is we try to think with that patient, with that family, what does a good day look like? And how can we help them have more good days? However we can do that, any variety of ways. So I think the thing that many people would be surprised by is that our job is filled with laughter. It's filled with joy. It's filled with hope. And when we show up, that's how we authentically present ourselves as we work to connect with that patient and family. I think the last thing is we really take compassion fatigue, or we really take moral distress. We really take these issues very seriously. And what we've worked to do as a team is if somebody's having a difficult time, it is unfortunate that children do die. And our team is very regularly working with children who die. And if we recognize that one of our team members has been deeply impacted by that, we try to give them the space to recover. We try to give them the space to fill their cup in a way so that they can show up authentically the next day or later that week. And so we do pay very close attention to that, recognizing that there is complication, there is moral residue, there is a weight to this work that we have to pay attention to so we can take care of many of these children and families across time.
I think one of the things that's really resonating with me as you talk is, and you know, we get similar, how do you do that? Where, you know, those things. And the reality is, if you're leading with the fear of the scariest thing for all of us as humans, if death and death of a child and death of a loved one is the fear, and we're only leading with that, then we're writing a story without looking into the reality. And so I think it's really beautiful to hear, okay, but behind that door is also this, this, and this. You have to walk through the door. You can't leave these families or your loved ones alone because you miss that, and all you have is the story you've written. All that to lead into, I think, a little bit of, we talk about the misconception of palliative life as just end of life care. So where does your team enter the picture to have the most success with an output of a joyful quality of life, end of life?
Yeah, thank you for that question. One of the things that I think is really important to recognize is when we contemplate palliative care, if it's thought of as like a phase, it almost always comes in as end of life care. And so it's not really a phase. We have to think about it as quality of life related care. I'm also an oncologist. As a neuro-oncologist, so I treated many children with really horrific brain tumors. As a neuro-oncologist, I was trying to fight that brain tumor so hard. And I was dialed in and really thinking about what can I do to fight that brain tumor. And that was like my main concern. And then I was like, and I'm really wanting the patient and family to have a good quality of life. Like that was my secondary mindset. I needed a team to partner with me where that was their first mindset. That was the first thing that they were thinking about. And so in these situations with patients with high-risk cancer, it's actually been an American Society of Clinical Oncology, an ASCO provision statement, that early integration of palliative care for patients with high-risk cancer and or high symptom burden is the standard of care. And so what we need to do is palliative care should be integrated very early on. In my opinion, the very best way to do that is introducing palliative care as just part of the team, not as a consult component, but truly just part of the team. We got there in many phases of care, in many situations at St. Jude, things like children undergoing bone marrow transplant. We were just a part of that transplant team. And it was a different approach that we took than we take when patients really have relapsed disease or are approaching end of life, but we were a part of the team right from the beginning. And one of the things that I think was really important to recognize then is if somebody were to see their schedule, if a family was to see their schedule, they'd see, oh, I don't need to meet with the koala team. The transplant team, the head of transplant would say something like, oh, well, they're just a part of our team. So if you're not going to meet with them, then we can't do the bone marrow transplant. Oh, okay. So then it's not scary. It's just part of the team. This is how we do things. We emphasize quality of life. We really focus in on these things. So that's what we're trying to do here at Stanford also. I met yesterday with one of the brain tumor doctors, and we're starting to integrate with all of her patients right from the point that they get here at the hospital. Historically, there's been a problem of resources. Palliative care has been very under-resourced. There aren't enough palliative care providers, for instance, to support that ASCO provisional statement. There's just not enough people doing this work. And so what we try to do is we try to work with the oncology team to figure out, okay, what are the right patient populations to start right from the beginning? And so, you all with this podcast know things like metastatic sarcoma or high risk brain tumors or bone marrow transplants or phase 1 clinical trials. These are things now where in those situations, we're meeting with the leaders of those programs to make sure that we can early integrate into that patient population so that it just becomes more of a part of standard of care. So it's not as much based on consults, because specifically in oncology, if it becomes like a part of a phase or, they're finally ready for palliative care, it becomes very much of an end of life approach. And that's not at all what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking, how comforting it must be for a family, even if they need this quality of life care at the end of life. It must be more comfortable to have that and to be able to take part in that wholly if it's been a part of their care the entire time versus
the trust
just
that's
showing
been
up.
built, the relationship that's already been built gets you over that first hump of needing to potentially make harder decisions because it's already been, there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And it certainly works better. It works better for everybody. It works better for the team, our team, and for the patient and family.
Yeah.
And it's very often the case that we are asked to come in at a point when something very bad has happened, and we can handle that. We do that just fine, where we come in and try to help families by very quickly getting to know them, learning who they are as people, and then trying to help them make difficult decisions. That definitely works better if we know them before that point, and we can make the best of it if it doesn't work that way.
Right. And I think in the long run of like the shift you're working to make here, the more you're coming in an early intervention, the less stigma there is as we move this conversation forward, like overall. And so that's really, really beautiful, but obviously requires, as you're saying, a lot more resources than right now you have.
That's exactly right. And historically, there's been a real scarcity mindset in palliative care where we have said things like, oh, that's great, we will do whatever it takes, and kind of bear the weight of those decisions. Now we really recognize that as a subspecialty, we are making a profound difference. And this interdisciplinary collaboration, the way that we're able to come up and help support patients with cancer, help support the oncology teams, it needs resources. And so here at Stanford, I'm very grateful that we've amassed a very large team and we're able to meet the needs at this time. And as we continue to grow, there's tremendous support for that growth here at the institution.
Yeah. I wonder if you could back up a little bit, because as we were having this conversation, I think it becomes apparent to listeners how important that integrating care like this is, not just for how children are experiencing their treatment, but in overall outcomes for them and their families. And I wonder if you could give a little bit of a timeline. How new of an idea is this? How long has this been sort of around? And also, what's the current state of this being a standard of care? How widespread is a program like this? Can you just kind of walk our listeners a little bit through its development and where we are today?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a really amazing question. The field of pediatric palliative care is very new. I feel very fortunate because I've worked in the field for more than 25 years now. But interestingly, when I first was introduced to the concept, I was a third-year medical student, and I was actually in an oncology clinic with an amazing mentor. His name was Javier Kane, and he was a neuro-oncologist, and I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my life? And I thought it was probably pediatric cancer. And he said, but I do this other thing called pediatric palliative care. Again, this is about 27 or 28 years ago now. And I literally looked back at him and I said, what's that? And so, it really was not a field. I had never heard those words put together in my med school career so far. So, kind of fast forward now, there were multiple teams that were being established kind of in the early 2000s. And as those teams were established, they were really institutional dependent. There weren't kind of bought in competencies. What are we really trying to do and accomplish here? And then what ended up happening is there was a creation of accredited training programs and an approach like all the other subspecialties where you had to have a competency-based training programs. And this happened around 2008. And so we had the American Board of Subspecialties that helped recognize this. And then we began to have people get board certification in hospice and palliative medicine. And Pediatrics was one of the boards that signed on to that. And so then fast forward just a little bit, as of 2012, anybody that comes into the field and calls themselves now a board certified hospice and palliative medicine physician has to have gone through a fellowship program. And so that really helped create agreement around what the competencies were, at least for training of physicians. Again, everybody had this kind of scarcity mindset and it wasn't that the mindset was really the main thing. The main thing was it was so new. People were just trying to break in and we're trying to hey, we need resources. And for a long time, palliative care teams were just under-resourced. And so I'm very fortunate to have been at St. Jude, where we had tremendous resources to integrate palliative care. And now here at Stanford, where we're building a really robust team to work with patients with cancer, but also across the entire hospital. So patients with heart disease or very small in extreme prematurity. So in the places like the NICU, or working with children with neurologic diseases. And when you think about this, what has happened now across time is there has been a developing evidence base. And that evidence showed early on that palliative care, one of the big barriers of integration was this concept of they're not ready. You kind of alluded to this before, and we studied that. And what we found was that it really was not usually the patients. It was not usually the parents. There was actually some sort of projection of the clinical team onto that family that, oh, you're not quite ready for palliative care. In fact, when we first designed, this is very interesting, when we first designed this concept of integrated palliative care, the way we communicate in medical sciences is we write articles about these things. We do journal articles. And the journal article we first wrote about the model to integrate palliative care, it was accompanied by an editorial. This editorial was written by the lead oncologist in the United States, and it said, "Pediatric palliative care. It's time to let them in." And so when you think about this, it's time to let them in. You're like, what in the world? That feels a lot like gatekeeping, like control.
Were we being kept out?
Right, we're being kept out.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fascinating part of that was only back in 2016. So here we are just 10 years later. But during those 10 years, we've really developed a strong evidence base. And we now know that by integrating palliative care, you can help families feel more supported in their decision-making. You can help them feel that their communication has been improved. You definitely, when you integrate palliative care, there's an improvement in quality of life. There's less depression, less anxiety. There's less caregiver burden. Interestingly, also families are more likely to state that they had happy moments in their end of life journey. And it's more common that they can say that they felt supported in choosing where their child wanted to die. And so there's a lot of evidence that has been developing around this in a really important way. We still have so much more work to do. Like I said, really, if you think about us as a field, it's really only been about 10 or 15 years that there's been an agreed upon competency base. This is an approach to take. And now we're just really rapidly ramping up that evidence base.
And I think that's a shift, right? That wouldn't happen if you didn't think about the care as quality of life, right? If you were thinking specifically about end of life care, that's where all of those projections come from, right? Like, oh, well, they're not ready for it. We're not giving up, I think, is the undercurrent of that. We don't want the family to think that it's hopeless, the treatment. But if it's integrated early, it's a part of the care. It's brilliant.
Yes.
And just from our conversations with families, with survivors. The things that they talk about not being prepared for with cancer was how lonely it was, how unsupported they can feel, and being overwhelmed by if they have options, being overwhelmed by the fact that they are not a physician and they're being asked to make physician level choices for the child's treatment. So this kind of care is so important, and we're very excited.
You really said that. Yeah, I think you said that so well. And one of the things that I think is very important to recognize is that we feel like we are a yes and so I'm an oncologist, like I said, so we must find cures, save children, and work for every day to be the best day possible. That's an inarguable thing. That's absolutely what patients and families want. They definitely want their child to be cured and to have the best possible quality of life. And so it really needs to be this yes and this is, I think, what people have been worried about, is that by integrating palliative care, we might convince people not to enroll in a clinical trial, or people might decide differently. But in palliative care, we just don't come in with an agenda. We come in and we seek to get to know patients and families. What are they worried about? What are they hoping for? What are their values? And then we help them think through these decisions together. And so if somebody enrolls on a clinical trial, amazing. If someone chooses not to, wonderful. We're here to support that decision, not judge that decision. And what we really try to do is help them think through things so they won't have regrets. In fact, I think this is one of the most important concepts that I have discovered is families who have regrets, they really struggle. And so what we try to think about is, how can we anticipate those regrets and how can we help address those regrets? People are always going to have some regrets. There's always going to be some worries about, did I make the right decisions? But how can we anticipate those? How can we be and kind of take the mantle of being in the regret prevention business? I sometimes, to help get this point across, try to think of ourselves as the heroes of regret prevention. There's data to show, we were just talking about the evidence base. There's data that shows that in bereaved families, if they have higher levels of regret, they have much worse grief and bereavement. And we have to be contemplating those things. We have to be helping families with these really difficult decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for taking us through where we were and where we get to today. I think what it makes us go into is, if there's a wider embracing of the philosophies here, if more hospitals and systems start taking on an earlier intervention, then what does the future look like in palliative care? I think, obviously, in our podcast, specifically to kids with cancer, but I think systemically, it's a really, really big conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a really wonderful question. It also gets me to be thinking about societal implications and kind of what can society be doing to help support patients with cancer? And, you alluded to that question earlier, and I feel like there's so much loneliness that comes through this, but it's because of how taboo these issues are. It's because we aren't willing to talk about them. That's why I'm so thankful to be here on your podcast, very thankful for your podcast as a whole, because we have to be imagining, hey, these patients and families are walking through this. And as a society, basically what we're doing is ignoring it, there's a story that some of our bereaved parents have told me, and all of them have stories similar to this. So they'll come to the clinic, they'll basically uproot their lives, they'll receive their cancer treatment. And as they're going through that, the community here at Stanford, let's say, becomes their family, and they grow with other patients and families. And should that child then have their disease that progresses and then eventually die, they feel like all of these variety of losses. They have obviously lost their child, and that child has died, and it leaves an impossible hole. They lose their Stanford family because they now move back into their community, and then their community does not really accept them. A story that it just really resonates with me is somebody at the grocery store, a bereaved parent, was coming around the corner and saw one of their friends down at the end of that aisle. And that friend was deciding to come down and turn, saw them, and then was like, oh, and then pushed forward. And that's what we do in society. We basically are like, okay, this might be happening, but I just don't have the space, the time. I don't know what to do about this. I don't want to make things worse. So what you do is you make that turn in the grocery store and you make things worse. And so what I want to say about integration of palliative care across society is that we have to actually realize that there is a societal responsibility to lean into these situations. That if we only think about the hospital, if we only think about the clinic, if we only think about the clinical situation, you're dealing with maybe 5 or 10% of the time. These patients and families live in a community. That community also needs to come around them, needs to embrace them. That's things like school. That's things like home-based care. So when I think about this, I think about nursing at home, and I think about the ability to do infusions at home or to provide medicines at home. But it's also things like their friend units. It's things like getting them involved in sports or activities, or really trying to be as normal as possible. And that takes society embracing and leaning in. So when I think about these next stages for palliative care, I think about this, what I've started to call the ecosystem of care. And this ecosystem of care, the hospital is like at the pinnacle of this. This is like when you need lots of care, you have to go to the hospital. But that's the minority of the time, but that's where we put most of our resources. So what do we think about as we think about into the community? We have to be integrating quality of life related principles, practices, resources, so that we're contemplating how can we best support this patient and family in the community. That takes all of us. That takes all of your listeners. That takes all sorts of volunteer entities in the community. That takes the schools. That takes school nurses and counselors. So how do we think about this in a very different way? And the first step to me is we have to recognize that there's a problem. And that's, again, why this podcast is so important. These children, and right now we're talking about children with cancer, but it could, again, be children with complex cardiac disease or patients with neurologic sequelae or problems. And so when you look at this, society basically cordons these people off usually, and that's why it's such a lonely feeling. We really have to open this up and embrace this as a society. And it's also so much better for all of us. So much better if we're willing to lean into those moments. So much better if we're able to, what we talked about earlier, connect with that patient, with that family, and help support them across the entirety of that journey throughout that ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for talking through that. I think especially the visual of being in the grocery store and seeing somebody, and then trying to figure out, are they avoiding me or did they just not see me? And then knowing they're avoiding you. And it's got to be one of the things, it's a visual that in different ways is repeated across a lot of the stories that we hear from families as well. And what's something, if you're the person standing behind the grocery cart on the other end of the aisle and you see your friend, what is something you can say when instead of turning and running away? I don't know what to say, but what should I say when I've heard this podcast and I'm making a decision not to avoid hard conversations anymore?
Yeah.
What's something I can say to a parent who's bereaved?
Just give us the magic answer right now.
Tell us what to do.
Yes. Well, I would say there's two things. The first thing is think about connection. Okay. And so anything that you can do to connect with that person, you've now decided I'm not going to disconnect. That's the kind of, again, the visual is the disconnection is just walking away. The connection is coming and leaning in. And the first thing to say is, oh my goodness, it is so good to see you. And I don't even have the words. I just want to tell you it's good to see you. And there's very likely to be a lot of tears, and there's very likely to be connection that simply happens from that. You probably don't have the right words because there aren't right words, because this is a tragic situation and devastating. And wow, that leads to connection. I don't even know what to say. I just want to tell you I care. Oh my goodness, those kinds of things matter. The second thing, so let's say now we've recovered from the, emotional outpouring that might happen at that point. Will you tell me a story about Stephen? Tell me something about that journey. Tell me about your child in that case and name that child. And that will be amazing. The family wants to talk about the child. That's the thing that everybody, Sigmund Freud made a huge mistake in saying like grief and bereavement is getting over that relationship. That's absolutely wrong. And we know it's very wrong. And the reality is these continuing bonds continue to grow and the relationship grows and changes even after the child has died. And what families want to do is they want to be able to talk about that child and they want you to listen, or they love it if you have a story about that child that they haven't had a chance to talk about with you. And so start talking about the child, the thing that you're most worried to do, because that's what the family wants to do. But that first step is one of connection, of I don't even know what to say. I'm glad that we're meeting here in the store and
I love it. Just
creating that space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just tell the truth, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what to say. It's overwhelming, but I am glad to see you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that a lot
right.
of good can come on just getting over that step of discomfort, like that the chasm can grow or you can shrink it.
That's right.
But you have control over that.
You have control to make a choice that can really do good for somebody else and for yourself. Because I would imagine that if I'm the grocery store, if we're still in the grocery store and I move forward, I'm wrestling with that choice for myself too. I'm replaying it. I probably go home and tell somebody else. You know what I mean?
So bad.
I feel guilty. I'm trying to tell
over
myself why I did the right thing. And there's a lot of retooling that again would be shrink the thing by moving forward into connection and leaning in. So, I mean, again, like a societal shift that really could do a lot of good for both parties. But if we're in this case saying really you're doing it for someone else, you're still going to shrink that chasm for yourself of the discomfort as well.
That's right. And you just can't imagine. I mean, we're built for connection. And so as people, when we're able to connect with somebody and take some of the strain or perhaps share some of the burden, because perhaps also you had been burdened with something else that's going on, all of a sudden what life is about is lived out right in front of you. Life is about love, life is about connection, and life is about community. And in that moment, all of those are being affirmed. And so the person leaving, both people leave deeply touched. Now, you might be like, wow, that was a lot and is overwhelming. And it might have been. And at the same time, it's one of those things. It's like going to the gym and working out. It's really good for you. And the problem in society right now is we're so distracted. We have so many things going on and there's just not an ability to like lean in these moments. And if we can create some bandwidth and space and be kind of aware around us, there's so much suffering going on. We're choosing a very extreme example, a bereaved parent, but this same thing could be said about whatever is going on. And we avoid that person in the grocery store all over the place. So there are many, many examples where if we took just a few moments in a day to lean in and really be instead of do. This is one of the phrases I have to tell myself. I'm very much of a doing kind of guy. Like I'm like, let's go. And I know that that's about the worst thing you can do in these moments. What you have to think about is this phrase, don't just do something, sit there. And that's a phrase, very different than just do it. It's not just do it. It's like just be. And we are human beings, not human doings. We've all heard this phrase. And by being with that person, by compassionately opening our heart and connecting with them, it has a profound impact on both parties.
Yeah. One of the things I think we have like 3 metaphors going, right? We've got, I'm leaving the grocery store. I'm going to the gym now.
We're in the gym.
So to your point, we are talking about a really hard example, the hardest one we can think of, a parent facing a parent who's lost a child. But to your point, if we find in the gym these moments to stretch that muscle on the smaller ones and build that ability to be and sit in the discomfort for a second and then connect, then maybe we're a little more ready when we get to the really, really hard ones.
Great.
And so I think if you're listening, you're like, ugh, you're really asking to do a lot. Fine, start way smaller. And also, you may not be in that scenario as often, potentially, as you or I or Val are, right? And so it doesn't mean there's not a nugget in there for you. It's still true that anything someone is dealing with or you're dealing with, you're hoping for connection and you're able to be a connective resource to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't agree more. Yeah.
I can think of 15 things off the top of my head that connection would solve right today.
Yes, yes.
I wonder, as we begin to wrap up, we've talked, this has been such a wonderful conversation.
Yes.
And I think it really did give people a glimpse into some of the work that you do and some of the ways that we can, as society and just humans, show up for folks with chronic illnesses, with cancer, with any of those. I wonder if you can have talk with our audience about what gives you hope, a moment of joy, what gives you hope. I feel like one of the things that you said will probably stick with me is that a lot of your work is very joyful, and that might be something that would be surprising to people. So I wonder what gives you hope or brings you joy.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am a person of deep faith. And so to be able to walk out and kind of be love or be light to people and kind of feel like I can be God's hands and light in the middle of such a difficult time, that gives me tremendous hope. And to be able to be authentic in that space and really imagine myself trying to wrap my arms around a patient and family, and that's really God doing that same thing for that family. And the other thing that gives me hope is when I look at this concept of connection, it's a unifying concept. And in this world today, there's so much division, there's so much strife, there's so many camps, this camp versus that camp, or I think we have a unifying concept here. And that unifying concept for your podcast listeners might be pediatric cancer, and it might be around that. But I think we could even take one step higher and just say, let's agree that children's suffering sucks. That's terrible. And there is no more unifying concept to say, let's try to address that childhood suffering. Let's try to support patients and families going through really difficult times. And so when I look at this, I feel like we're on to something that is very unifying. And that gives me tremendous hope. I have tremendous hope because I know that people come together around this. People aren't wondering which camp are you from when you're trying to face an illness like this. So the things that really matter in life unify us. And I'm a part of seeing that every single day. We could picture people from very, very different backgrounds, very different belief systems, very different approaches to life. And when they walk through these same situations, concepts of love, concepts of connection, concepts of addressing suffering, these are things that unify us. And when I see that every day, that gives me tremendous hope.
I can't thank you enough.
Dare I say, he really is the chief koala bear.
You are the chief koala bear. I needed this koala conversation more than I could express. So I just am personally so grateful for you today. I hope we can keep having conversations online and off, because this is really beautiful. I just want to take a second and say thank you before. Now I'm going to outro, but I don't want to outro, but we're outroing. The reason CKC invests in innovative research is to make life and treatment easier on kids and their family. If you're listening and you want to support the research, you want to learn more about what we're doing, you can visit cannonballkidscancer.org.
And we want to thank you for listening to Game Over Cancer and encourage you to leave a review, make a comment, maybe ask some questions. If you're also wondering other things you can say in the grocery store, we can find out and respond. Yeah. But if you engage with our podcast, that'll help us educate for change and get this message out to more people.
Absolutely. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you joining us and making a commitment to be part of our fight. I'm Dana Nichols.
I'm Val Solomon.
And until next time, we will see you later.
Join us as we transform fear into courage and turn adversity into opportunities for change.
If you want to be involved in the conversations that create change in the world of pediatric cancer, take a moment, share, like, and subscribe. Absolutely.